To get started on this bonus project, you should have downloaded both the Paint a Monster and Paint a Fruit project files. Both of these have a variety of different starting points that we're going to colorize, and I'm going to show you two different methods that you can use to create your designs. Now, as far as the colors go, of course we want the fruits to be their natural color, but the monsters, you can use the example or you can come up with your own. It really doesn't matter. What I really want to see is you use these techniques to be able to colorize any kind of photograph or any kind of drawing within Photoshop. To get started, let's start off with the fruit. Choose any fruit that you want to colorize and let's bring it into Photoshop. You can drag and drop it or go up to File and Open. Notice that when you open this image, the picture is on its own background layer. The first thing we want to do is to create a new blank layer, and this is going to be called our solid color layer. Let's make sure we spell color correctly too, C-O-L-O-R. Now there's a couple of different ways we can quickly fill in an area, but the one tool that probably works best is going to be your paint bucket tool. This tool can be found hiding underneath your gradient tool, so if you don't see it, select that. And let's have a look at some of our options at the top. First off, set your mode to be a foreground color. This means whatever is in your foreground swatch, that's what it's going to fill in. Do make sure your mode is in normal with 100% opacity. The tolerance really won't come into play for what we're doing, but for the most part, you can keep your tolerance within 30 to 50 is okay. I'm just going to set mine to 40 and keep it this way. Now, what we do want to make sure is turned on is contiguous and sample all layers. This is going to be important because we want to stay inside of an area. We want all of our filled area to be contiguous, and we want to look at all the layers, not just the layer that we're working on. We want to look at the background layer below it. So let's go ahead and select our foreground color. Since this is going to be an apple, I'm going to make it a red apple. The color that I'm going to choose doesn't have to be light or dark. I'm actually going to try to choose kind of a mid-tone, and I'm going to click on the inside of it, and you can see how it quickly and easily fills in that area. If I wanted to do the leaf, let's choose a green color. Again, doesn't have to be perfect, but that's what we want to click on and work within. And then finally, maybe I'll do brown for the stem. I see I've missed one little part. Do make sure you zoom in. Remember, you can hold down the Option key at any time, get your eyedropper and pick up that, and then finally fill in with that area. That looks pretty good. I'm going to zoom out. Now, if you have a look at your layers panel, you can turn off the background layer and see that this solid layer has all the colors filled in and all the black was done on the background itself. If we wanted to add highlights and shadows or any other details, let's do this on a separate layer as well too. This time, on top of the solid color, we're going to move one more layer. We're going to call this the details layer. And we want to be able to paint shadows, highlights, and anything else just inside of here. Now to do this, I'm going to grab my regular brush tool. If you don't see your brush tool, it may be hiding underneath, there it is, your mixer brush tool. But with this regular brush tool, we can go up to our options and we can play around with the different options and different kinds of brushes we're going to work with. For now, I'm just going to choose a soft round brush. Because it's soft, it'll blend in really, really well. The other thing I can do is to change my opacity of my brush. Keep the flow at 100%, but knocking down the opacity allows you to paint in a color and slowly build it up. Typically, I keep my colors or my opacity between 20 and 50%, depending on what or how quickly you want to be able to transition in. Now, if I want to be able to fill in a specific area, I can hold down my Option key and they can pick up on the red color. Let's say I wanted to be able to paint just a shadow edge to this. In your color panel, you can see how it automatically chooses this color. All I've got to do is to pick a darker version of that color. Now when I go in to paint the details, I can start to paint on top of my apple. However, I've got one small problem that's cropping up, and you can see it start to happen. Everything's going outside my edges of my apple. To fix this, let's change your details layer to a clipping mask. With the details layer selected, we can go up to Layer, down to Create Clipping Mask, and automatically you see how it clips it inside of this red area. Everything in here is automatically staying inside of here. So when you go to paint, be careful as you paint, but you can go outside the edges and it works really, really well. If I wanted to pick up a highlight edge, again, hold down Option, click on Red, and then pick a highlight or a lighter color. I can go over here on this edge and I can paint in that too. And you can do this for all the different parts of your subject. Now for smaller parts, especially things like this little stem here, let's say I wanted to add a brown edge to it. I need to make my brush a little bit smaller, at least small enough to fit in the area. And I need to select my color. So Option and click. Let's go over to our color panel and choose just a darker color. Now as I paint, of course it's going to stay inside this edge. Let me undo this just for a second. We'll bring my opacity up a good bit so we can see that. There we go. Of course it's going to stay inside here, but it's still going to get inside of my red area. If this happens, it's still clipping inside the layer. We just need to further select and refine just this area. So to help select it, you can use your selection tools. The tool that I like to use is the Magic Wand tool. With the Magic Wand, you can set your tolerance to be relatively small, so about 30 is okay. And you can tell it to sample all the layers. This way, we can work on the details layer, click inside of here, and it will sample the color that's below. So just like with the paint bucket, sampling all layers is important. Now when you grab your paintbrush tool, you can paint inside of that area, and it's only going to stay inside of the selected area. Let's do the same for the leaf. I'll go up to Select and Deselect. Choose your selection tool. Click inside the leaf area. I'm going to hold down the Shift key and add on to my selection. So now all of these are selected. I'll give you another good keyboard shortcut. If you go to View and tell it to hide the extras, this will turn off visibility for your selection, but it'll still say selected. Now I can grab my paintbrush and pick up the color green. Let's do a darker shade of green. I'm going to make my brush a little bit bigger and paint in just this edge, and maybe it gets darker down here. Remember to change your opacity, bringing it down a good bit so that when you paint, it blends in. It may take several clicks or several passes, but it goes much, much smoother. If we wanted to add a highlight edge to it, let's pick up our color green and choose a lighter color of green. Another thing that you can do with these brushes is to play around with some of the different styles of brush. If rather than having just a solid or a transitional feathered edge, if we scroll down, we can look at some of the wet and dry media that we're working on. Opening up the dry media will give you a variety of different brushes. Let's do this charcoal brush. Do be aware that it's a brush and not an eraser or something else that's already on here. So with the charcoal selected, I'm going to go to View, and let's show the extras now, and deselect it. Now I want to paint inside of this apple again. So one more time, I can either select the area or I can just go ahead and paint. I'm going to select the color, and let's see if we can stipple in some different colors to work in. Ooh, so that's really, really dark. May not be what I want. Let's see if I can find a more stipply kind of effect. If I go under my legacy brushes, here's a bunch of different styles of brush that do different things. Oh, there's even butterflies. You can play around with it to get the effect that you want, but I think a good dry media brush, flat scrub, no spacing, will give you this effect. Again, this is something simply to play around with until you get the effect that you want from there. When you're finished, I want you to add highlights, shadows, whatever you want to your design. Let's save this up as a Photoshop file. File and Save As. We'll call it Apple, put your name on it, and make sure Photoshop is the format that you're going to submit. The next method we could use is going to be applied to the monsters. Again, choose any monster that you wish. I'm going to use this guy as my example and open him in Photoshop. This time we can start off in a similar fashion. Go to your Layers panel. Let's call this the Solid Color layer. Grab your Paint Bucket tool and select the color that you want to fill in for your monster. Now, your monster may have areas that are a little bit more difficult to fill in. If I click on the outside of this area, you can see how it gets most of his body, but I didn't really want to fill in the inside of these nostrils. If this happens, you may need to go in first with your paintbrush tool, and let's get just a regular, solid, round, hard round paintbrush, and we need to block off any areas that don't need to be filled in. So if I wanted his nostrils to not be filled in, all I'm going to do is to paint just a little bit of a block so that it keeps that nice and closed off. Now when I grab my paint bucket tool, there's probably another little area that it's still seeping color into. So we're going to get it. Grab my paint bucket tool now. Do make sure all layers is selected. Now when I click, you can see how it doesn't fill in that entire area. So take some time and fill in the solid colors that you need first, and then we're going to go in and add the details. Now that we've got everything filled in, you'll notice that we kind of lost some details in our lines that we had. In order to bring it back, because we've got a solid color on top of a black and white illustration, let's change our blending mode to multiply. When you multiply it, that allows all of the darker outlines to show through while you can see all the details and the colors on top. Now let's go in and paint in some of the details. In order to do this, rather than making a separate layer, we're going to lock down the transparency of our current pixels. This means we can only paint and work inside of an area if there's pixels already existing. To do this, click on the very first lock inside of your lock. This is the transparency lock. Just like we did before, we can choose our paintbrush tool, and we can play around with the different kinds of brushes or how we want this to work. You can even play around with some of the textured type brushes. Choose the color that you want. We'll make my brush a little bit bigger. Hold down Option, say I wanted a darker purple, and then as I paint, because I've got the transparency lock turned on, it's going to paint only inside of that area on that layer. The other thing you can do is if you wanted to mix things around, choose your mixer brush tool. The mixer brush tool can also use many of the different faux textures and scatter brushes as well. Just play around with how you want the brushes to blend together with the area that you do have selected. In our case, let's see if we can get it to be very wet, very heavy medium. I'll swap up my brush to be something a little bit different. Again, mixer brush tool, much larger. You can see how that starts to blend out those. So it takes a little bit of playing around with, but once you add the solid colors to it, again, we'll go to dry, we'll add some solid color, then we'll swap over to maybe wet, and we can blend it out into what we like. We're going to add highlights and shadows to the entire area. Just as with the other one, you can also select an area. So if you don't want these blending in with the horns at the top, choose your magic wand tool and click on the color area. In this case, we don't even have to sample all the layers. We can just tell it to click on this layer and sample all the parts of here. We'll hide the extras, grab our mixer brush tool. Actually, we'll pick up the color first. Now I can grab my mixer brush tool and let's lay down some dry colors first. And then we can swap over to wet and start to blend those in. Working with what we got. Let's add some highlights. Again, this time, regular highlights. Maybe even lighter. And then swap over to a wet brush and blend things in. Repeat this process until all of your entire monster has texture and has highlights and has color to it. You can even use some of the new brushes that were added that allows you to blend in and even have a little bit of texture to it. Oops. For this one, let's pick up a color. Let's do some purple. We can paint on some hairs for him. We'll start it off here. Swap up to more of a blending one. And blend it in with some texture. That's looking good. So when you're ready, go to File, do all the highlights, all the shadows through the entire monster. Again, you can look at the example. Go to File and Save As. And let's save this up as Monster with your name on it. Upload both of the Photoshop files for both your monster and your fruit to the class page for 10 extra bonus points credit.